If you'll allow me this morning to begin my sermon with a few unseasonable examples, I want to show this picture. Can you put up the first picture? Sorry, Luca, I know it's like, picture. So this is a picture of, for those of you who don't know, that's my wife, Amy. And around her are some of my dearest friends and family. And they're in my backyard. I don't know if you can tell, during a hailstorm. Speaking of unseasonable, you can see the pieces of hail kind of running down in front of them. Can anybody guess what day this was? Be impressed if you can. So there were actually two hailstorms in Malden. This is Easter. It was Easter. We were doing an egg hunt in our backyard during a hailstorm on Easter, because when your dad's a minister, you have to wait until the afternoon to look for your eggs. And so we ended up just outside as the hailstorm was happening. Now, I love this picture because you can see these scrunched up faces in the background and these pieces of ice floating down. But my favorite part is this sort of surprised laughter on Amy's face. So who'd have thought that Easter with hail could be the most beautiful thing, could show joy despite this unexpected weather? All right, and another unseasonable example. We're going to pull up the next one. Okay, this comic is on a Christmas theme, and it's from Strange Planet by Nathan Pyle. The first panel says, "The erratic creature is obsessed with the festive object. Should we secure them?" So it's a cat looking up at a Christmas decoration. The next panel says, "The objects are meant to be precarious and delicate. This is a dilemma." The next panel says, I wish the objects brought the creature joy. The other alien says they do. The last panel says, "In their potential for destruction, our joys are at odds." Yes, the alien says. Makes me think of the precariousness from which beauty rests in our lives. Perhaps one of the things about beauty that is most important is it is delicate and fleeting and only there for a moment. Okay, one final illustration. This time a more seasonable one. Next picture. Okay, this picture. I love that you're already laughing. This was taken of me the day I was ordained to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. It was taken at the church where I did my internship, and it was a hot day. It was way hotter than today. And there was no air conditioning, and I spent the entire day before fretting over whether or not clergy who attended should wear robes or not. Like, seriously worried about this all day. What was appropriate? This was the day I would always remember. Would it be cheapened if the ministers involved weren't wearing their full ministerial garb? But it was too hot, so we didn't. And when I look at this picture, I don't look hot. I just look about 12. Turns out that I became a minister that didn't really like to wear robes anyways. And so this picture actually looks more like me. And what's more, what do I remember about that day? It's not how hot it was. What I remember was how meaningful it was to be surrounded by people that I love. I think some folks here might have even been there. And on that day when it was hot and sticky, there was beauty despite the discomfort. Okay, thanks, Luca. That's enough, all the pictures. Thank you. I share these vignettes with you to highlight the ways in which simple beauty can exist as side by side with discomfort and even fear. These mild examples of discomfort and anxiety could be taken out of context coming this morning. They can be taken as metaphors, is what I'm trying to say. If you think about the world that we live in, perhaps the hail could be the war and violence that surrounds us. What's happening to the people in Ukraine, or the racist violence in Buffalo last week. The cat wanting to take away joy are the politicians trying to take our rights from our bodies and our freedoms. The oppressive heat is the coronavirus pandemic, ever present and always here, telling us that we can't live our lives the way we used to, threatening the lives of people we love. It's not that these things in and of themselves bring us beauty. It's not that violence brings beauty or politicians in and of themselves are beautiful in their destruction of our rights. Of course, this is where the metaphor falls apart because cats are beautiful. But it's about the fact that despite that, finding beauty in these things, during these things, is a rebellious act. Finding beauty despite difficult circumstances can bring a contrast that shows us the most beautiful, truest things that we can see. Presbyterian minister and author Frederick Buechner said, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid." Beautiful and terrible things exist in our world. In fact, sometimes, often, they even exist together. Another example I'll give you from my life. In the book Untamed by Christian mummy blogger Glennon Doyle, yes, I read a book by a Christian mummy blogger. After all, I'm almost a Christian and almost a mummy. In the book, she talks about the decisions that led her to leave her husband and ultimately accept her identity as a woman who loved other women and marry soccer star Abby Wambach. And in telling this story, she talks about how important it is for us to think about what living our truest and most beautiful life might look like. What does your truest, most beautiful life look like? Now, I was afraid to read this book, just a little. Well, mostly I was afraid for my wife to read it because everyone I know who read it, who wholeheartedly recommended it to me, ended up breaking up with their long-term partner. But I like nothing more than being able to have book conversations with my friends. So when it became available from the library, I borrowed it. And I read it. And I got to this line, the one that talked about the truest, most beautiful life. And I realized, to my surprise, that it was the one I was already living. If you know anything about the year I've had, that might surprise you. In fact, even just the past few months of 2022, I've dealt with a massive lack of childcare, heartbreak of the lives of my kids, mental health crisis in my family, serious complaint against my kids' school, and then we all got COVID. I was literally giving a sermon in January about how overwhelming the pandemic was happening before any of those things happened. But this realization was quite something. I was living my truest, most beautiful life. Yet terrible things continued to happen around me. Glennon Doyle says, the truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one. We need to let go of the lie that it's supposed to be. I think that's pretty poignant. Of course, there are things I wish that were different, and I find beauty despite those things. Of course, this is easy for me to say. I'm a white man living in a state that hasn't taken away my rights. I'm not worried about where my next meal will come from or how I'm going to pay rent. But this small example can open something up because there is something that can be a little darker about beauty. Beauty can be a coping mechanism. Now, I want to give credit here to Aisha Cruz, who's a member of our worship team, who's I think here online, joining us online. They brought this up when we talked about this subject in our worship meeting. They said, finding beauty is a coping mechanism for surviving the unsurvivable. They referenced the excerpt from Night where there's a woman that plays violin on top of the bodies. And I thought about the band that played as the Titanic sank. Sometimes it's the only way for us to find ourselves, to feel our humanity in the midst of the unsurvivable. There is nothing beautiful in mass death, and yet sometimes we create beauty despite it. And that's why art is so important, not just for those with the resources to go to museums and buy expensive paintings, but creating art, seeing art. That's what's important. I'm reminded of in the Nazi concentration camps where a man wrote on the wall, "I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I don't feel it. I believe in God even when God is silent." I think of the times when people were enslaved and people still danced and sang and wrote spirituals together. I think about how it was illegal for queer people to gather together, but they did to find each other's beauty. Think about Black joy, something that's beautiful, a defiant kind of beauty that exists despite the oppression. That says, I'm not going to let you take away my truest, most beautiful life. Like our reading, beauty is not a distraction from the troubles of the world. We are here not to protect our hearts from breaking, as the man in the story tells us, shows us a broken heart is full of beauty. And so I offer you this. This is our world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Be not afraid. It's the terrible things that put the beauty in sharp relief. My message to you is to allow yourself to see that beauty, to find it, to create it amidst the reality of our world, to treasure its fleetingness and let it go. It's a way to survive. It's an act of rebellion to see this true beauty around us. May it be so. Let us say together, Amen. Amen.